Welcome to Leadership and Life Chat with your hosts, me, Becky Ames.
And me, Mark Curtis. In each episode, we'll be illustrating how success in leadership is inextricably linked with success in life.
Whether it's leadership in business, society, family or friends, we're all leaders.
Using our experiences and a range of expert guests, we'll share secrets to boosting your health, wealth and self.
So let's get on with the show.
Very often, as busy leaders, we don't take time to think about and plan our own personal brand. On today's show, we are joined by Mihaela Berciu. Mihaela is a leadership breakthrough specialist who helps leaders and organisations to find the clarity they need to improve performance and drive even greater success. Mihaela has produced and hosted a top-ranking TV show dedicated to personal branding and published 2 best-selling books, Dress for Success and Business Etiquette. Mihaela, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Becky. Thank you for having me.
It's great you could be with us today. So before we get into the main conversation around personal brand, Mihaela, would you just like to tell the listeners a little bit about your story and your journey?
Of course, sure. So I was born in Romania and grew up there until I was about 20. I was born in communism, and that was an interesting time, to be born and grow up in, because it was so different. My life was so different from, the life of other children and teenagers that I later, got to meet and understand that what we were worried about was completely different than what they were worried about. And funnily enough, as teenagers, most of my friends from the West were worried about their personal brand without knowing that that's what they're worried about. Whereas in my teenage years, we were worried, or I was worried, about who to trust and what am I allowed to say and what am I not allowed to say, because saying the wrong thing could lead to very difficult conversations for my parents, and also to very serious outcomes. But of course, we were still teenagers and we still enjoyed life as we knew it. But it was at an early age that I understood there are different aspects that matter. And later on, about 20 years, later, I actually had the chance to introduce in Romania the concept of personal branding, which was a very new concept. Romania was still quite new post revolution. So, of course, the concept of personal branding was very interesting topic, very hot topic, which gave me the opportunity to help people pay more attention to to what means to have a personal brand, because we all have a personal brand, whether we like it or not, whether we manage it or not. We all do. It is much better to be aware of it and to work with your personal brand and make it work for you rather than against you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as you say, I mean, I think because we're all, Becky and I grew up in a democracy, we did, you don't even think about how it would be different in a different country, in a different political system. So I think just highlighting that probably, is making us think a little bit about, yeah, you're right. We didn't have to think about the ramifications of things we did or said, and it's maybe we take our own freedom for granted sometimes. So that was a really interesting thing coming out. So Mihaela, one of the things we perhaps like to start on is, nowadays, one of the things we hear a lot around is personal brand versus corporate brand, and perhaps when Becky and I were younger in our careers, it was all about the corporate brand, it was very much all about Larking Gowen, and, we were just representing Larking Gowen. But maybe over the last few years, people seem to be trusting personal brands more than corporate brands. So how does that all work? It seems like a minefield to have to maybe maneuver around when you're in business nowadays.
Well, it is. Of course, in the not so distant past, identifying yourself with the brand of a company, of a corporation, mostly, it immediately brought more gravitas. Of course, people use that because, and there's still an element of that, and it will always be an element of that for as long as you work for a company that is not your own, because you exit from Y, and people meet with you most of the day during your work hours, meet with you because you work for that company, because they want or need something from that company. So also when they meet you, they expect a certain something from how you present yourself because you work for that company. But nowadays, and that was could be quite a big pressure as well, for a lot of people, thinking that they have to raise up to a very high expectation of the self, and the fear of not letting down the company together could put a lot of pressure. And there's still an element of that, but today, because the society, and mostly probably because of social media, the society evolved in a way that is putting more the individual at the forefront than it is the company. And nowadays, even in interviews, when you want to hire someone, people tend to put a lot more importance to who they are, what are they looking for, what is their career journey, expectation, and so the self becomes a much stronger player than it used to be. So naturally, the personal brand comes as a stronger identity, if you want. And that, of course, brings big pressures, but in a different way. Because of social media, we are much more exposed. So our personal brand is something that we need to manage a lot more closely.
I was going to say about how historically, probably, yeah, exactly what Mark said. When we started our careers, it was very much about the corporate brand, and you had to live up to that, didn't you? You had a persona that you thought you had to portray, put pressure on yourselves, quite a corporate image, and maintaining that can be quite challenging for a lot of people, can't it? And you're not always able to, or we didn't perhaps feel able to show our authentic selves, and keeping that persona going. Mark and I have done had a deep dive chat which about dressing for success and what expectations are, and about how people have really changed their views on that aspect of things, even what we wear, how we present ourselves. And those views have changed so much, haven't they, over recent years?
Yes, true. They have, and that's because corporate image came as a package. You had to look a certain way. You had to speak a certain way. There were all the necessary buzzwords that you
Mm.
had to use in your communication, whether verbal or written. Um, there was you're very right. You were almost as if taking on a different persona, and then you would meet those people outside of work, and you think, oh wow,
Yeah.
okay, I did not expect that, or oh, you're a lot more fun than I thought you were. And because they would allow the real authentic selves to come out. And today, yes, including how we dress is a lot more looser, let's say, than the very strict way of dressing in the past. There's still elements, of course, depending on what industry you work in, that it's recommended that you follow. But majority of the setups are more casual nowadays. And then, of course, in the last 3 years, working from home brings an extra element, or the ability to work from home brings an extra element of showing who we are. It's showing bits of your home, showing, being dressed up a bit more casual probably than you would be in a more sort of a formal environment. And all of this contribute to our brand, because the brand is, a 360 and living thing that evolves with us.
Yeah. So how do leaders get the balance? How would you recommend people approach, how much they do corporate brand versus personal brand? If there's people listening to this thinking, well, where do I start? How do I get the balance? What would you say to them, Mihaela?
To make something very very clear, is when you work for some company, whether it's a private company or it's a corporation, it doesn't matter. You are part of their brand, so that you cannot get away from, unless you're an entrepreneur and or a freelancer and you represent yourself, full stop. As long as you are employed by a company, you are part of their brand, and you cannot deny, or you cannot ignore or challenge that. That doesn't mean you should lose who you are, and you should lose yourself, because being authentic, and by being authentic, it doesn't mean I don't want it to be understood as a unicorn. I'm authentic. I'm me. I'm not mixing up with anyone else. Being authentic is being true and honest to your values, to what really truly matters to you, which should help you embrace, and find the right ways to mix this and do fair justice to both your brand, personal brand, and the company brand. Because like we said, at the end of the day, any conversation you have, it is in the name of that company that you work for. But at the same time, it is you who speaks, and it is you who interacts personally with the other people. So finding this balance is very important, and it's very important also because those people you meet with in your official capacity, they meet you. They meet the individual. So if you are gonna convince them to enter a partnership, to buy a service, to buy a product, to buy whatever, it is you, the individual, at the end of the day, that convinces them. Because yes, when they meet with you, they think, oh, I would probably like to work at this company, I would probably love to buy that service or whatever. So they are to an extent sold. But if your connection with them is not happening and is not positive, the interaction is not engaging, they're just going to go to the next company that sells pretty much the same thing, uh, or similar. But because they have a better interaction with that person, they will definitely go there. The funny thing is, when it comes to products, people are most probably loyal to the product. But when it comes to services, people are more loyal to the person they interact with, rather than the brand of the company. And although even with some products it happens, to me it definitely happened a few times where I got very well along with someone, in shop, let's say. And when they moved to another company, I moved with them, because I was loyal to them. And it might sound silly, but we do that when we connect very well with someone. It sometimes becomes more important, their personal brand and the connection with that person, than the brand of the company. And I'm sure, especially as leaders, I'm sure you probably have experienced this in your professional life, where you worked with a company, and as soon as one, top level executive has left and another one came in, things have changed. your interaction with that company, your relationship with that company, the way you trust what they do and they sell, and the way you appreciate the value they bring changes.
Absolutely, Mihaela. I couldn't agree more. I think we see that both in terms of how people interact with us, so how we portray our personal brand, but also who we choose to do business with, like you say. So very much, we rely a lot on other professionals making referrals to us, for example. It's so much nicer. It's so much better to do business with people that you like, trust, want to work with, than having to force those relationships. And that's what it comes down to. But even down to personally, you're so right about how you might move because of the individual moves. Hairdresser's an absolute classic, isn't it? Always follow my hairdresser. That's not just because of her skills. It's because I like how she is and I'm comfortable in that scenario. And it's often a case of, if you feel comfortable with someone, you want that interaction, don't you? You seek them out. And that's their personal brand, ultimately.
It was interesting as you were talking there. It reminded me of a conversation I had with my dad when we were talking about sales techniques. And he was telling me how he went on a course with the business he worked for. It would have been about 1980, so a long while ago. And they talked very much around people have to trust you, they have to trust the company, and they have to trust your product. And interestingly, I was listening to a training course with Jordan Belfort, the Real Wolf of Wall Street, and he was using that almost as part of his sales system. But it just shows none of this stuff is new. It's all been around for a while, and it might not have been called personal branding back in the 1980s, but it's exactly what it was still, wasn't it? It's about trust, isn't it? Ultimately, brand is all about building trust, and yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When you, as you say, like when you will follow people, if you trust the person and their product, that can sometimes be stronger than the corporate brand.
Absolutely. And Becky, you mentioned referrals. I think referrals is probably the best example of how powerful a personal brand can be, because if you like and trust someone and they refer someone to you, you immediately expect, and you enter that interaction, that relationship, trusting and expecting to like that person, because if the person you like and trust recommends someone else, so they like and trust, it's almost like maths. If A equals B and B equals C, then A definitely equals C. And that's the power of personal branding. And if you actually don't have the same interaction with this other person, you're a bit thrown off, and you're like, oh, what's happening here? I'm supposed to like this person, I should have trusted this person straight away, but it's not happening. So, and you do go back to the other person most of the times and say, well, why, how do you find them? So, because I'm not seeing it. And again, it's the power of the personal brand of the person you like that you go back to and fall back to, for answers. So I think referrals is definitely probably the strongest example of the impact of personal branding. Yes.
And I think that the as well, we were talking about how Mark, you were saying how these things have always been the case since your dad was on his training in 1980s. But I think what we've seen recently is almost the ratio of each of those has shifted. So personal brand has moved up the scale, if you like, in terms of importance. Yeah. Maybe, personal brand and the product and the company brand were, relatively equal. But it just feels to me like personal brand has edged ahead now, and we're kind of almost over interacting with people, corporates that we don't want to do business with. We're very much like, you know what, if I'm at work and I'm doing this, then I want to be having positive relationships with people and an element of fun as well, people you can get on with, and that's personal brand certainly risen up for me in terms of the scale.
Yes, absolutely. And also there's the flip side of that is that because of social media nowadays, when we meet or we're about to meet someone, we do a bit of background search, because it's available. It's so easy to do it. You go on LinkedIn or you go on Instagram, you do a Google search, you create a brand for that person based on whatever is out there, and then you meet them, and sometimes that image, the personal brand, the image you created is aligned with what you're meeting, but other times it's not. That's again, what personal brand is all about. And that's why I'm saying, it can work for you, or it can work against you. Owning up to who you are, it's very important. And yes, it's very important to keep evolving, but your brand will evolve with you as long as it is authentic and aligned with who you are. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Yeah, yeah. You're waiting for that glossy persona that you've seen online to present itself, and sometimes this is a relief when it doesn't, maybe because you were a bit in
Yeah,
awe and a bit like ooh, and other times
yeah,
you're like, hang on, they're not quite as lively as I expected them to be. But this is why we need to be so conscious about what we put out there
yeah,
on every platform, every resource, isn't it? Whereas years ago
absolutely.
we didn't have to worry about that. We didn't share every aspect of our lives in the way
Yeah,
that we do now.
it's true. It's a lot more pressure nowadays. Although you have all the tools, to build and to benefit
Mm.
from building a strong personal brand. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It can help you, but it can also hinder your progress.
But it's about being conscious, I guess, that all of this stuff is
Mm,
out there. And, if you're going for a job, they may well Google you, look you up on Facebook and see what they can see. So, use
mm,
the tools that you have available to you, both to make things private if you want them to be private, but
mm.
equally what you're putting out there, does it fit with how you want people to see you as much as anything, isn't it?
Yes, true.
It's
And the
tough.
difficulty is this stuff is out there forever, isn't it? You might
Yeah,
have put something out there when you were 14, 15, 16. You might be now mid 20s or beyond, and people are potentially still going to judge you on something that happened a long while ago. And that's got to be a real danger around personal branding for the future. I mean, does
of
that
course.
happen, Mihaela, or do people go, "Oh, actually it was 10 years ago, let's not worry about that"? They've probably grown up and changed, or does that kind of stuff cause a problem, do you think?
People will always judge. That's for sure. I mean that, it's in our nature. Is probably the strongest thing we do, and it is also our, the strongest or the biggest fear we live with, apart from the fear of dying, which is most of the time dormant, so it's not as debilitating as it is the fear of being judged. So we can evolve, of course, to the point where we stop judging and we build or draw opinions. I always tell, especially younger people I meet. My children are 24 and 25, so I'm surrounded by, there's a lot of amazing young adults, and I always tell them, if there is one advice I can give you, is never act or do things thinking, I don't care what others think. In reality, you do care, and in reality, it will always come back to bite you. So you, after the fact, you will end up caring. So do care, and but care in the sense that don't become a people pleaser, but rather look at that as a filter. How would I judge someone else? How would what would be the conclusions I would be drawing if I saw someone else doing this or posting this or saying this or whatever. So use it as a positive filter rather than turn it into a people pleaser, which of course is not the right thing to do. But using it as a positive guide, it will help a lot.
So do you think people should manage their online profiles in as much as, as you get a bit older, can you go back and sort of cleanse some of your history from when you were young and foolish, in inverted
Of
commas?
course.
Is that something so do you recommend people do that as they, maybe as they move into their 20s and they start thinking about their future careers, that they do take a look back and they do something to manage their own online profiles and they actually actively manage
Mm.
it?
Yeah, of course I do. Because when you're a teenager, you are almost an anarchist. You have to show, you're against the system. You don't care. You don't listen. You do everything that you're not supposed to do because you can and because you're going to change the world. And, this whole bravada. So you do definitely do things that even 3, 4, 5 years later, you yourself look back and think, oh my
Yeah.
God, what was I thinking? So there are two things that can be done in a situation like that. It's either you go back and delete whatever you posted, if you still can, or probably even better is to pick up that post again and just be honest and say, oh my God, what was I thinking? And it's only been 3, 4 years ago, but hey, I thought I was invincible, and I will be taking over the world, but actually life has taught me that things don't work quite like that. So and I think that is more honest, and also that shows a quality that I admire, which is accountability. I've done that, I've said that, but now I know better, and now I know how I'm more mature, and I can show you that you can see the progress, because nobody will hold against you something you said in your rebel teenage years, especially if you now show more maturity and understanding that, yeah, it was fun then, but it's not what's really going on. And that can be done even later in life, because you are allowed to change your mind. You evolve and your opinions change. I mean, growing up in communism, I grew up with a set of patterns of behavior that were dictated by my surroundings, by my reality, and they were needed in order to I'm going to use the word survive, but not necessarily in the life and death kind of situation, although it could have been. But and then moving to the West and evolving in a democracy, my patterns of behavior changed, my beliefs changed, my understanding of the world changed. So whilst those were true, and they represented who I was at the time, these ones are also true, and they represent who I am now. But between then and now, there's been a journey. So I'm not going to deny who I was, but I definitely, am more aligned with who I am now. So I think people, owning up is really good. And even if sometimes, in a moment of anger, in a moment of frustration or whatever, we say or post something or do something, um, it's okay. It's okay. Own up
Yeah.
to it. Own up to it, and people, will resonate. Probably with both the anger moment and the owning up
Yeah.
later on.
Yeah. It's very human, isn't it? We've all been there. And actually it's just like you say, holding yourself to account just allows others to see another side of you that otherwise, a few years ago, we, without social media, but we would all have had this mask on, almost this persona that we
Mm,
thought we needed to live up to. And I
mm.
very much buy into, once you get to the real person, that's so much more valuable, interesting, intriguing. You want to find out more as well, don't you? So um
Exactly. The more human, and the more
yeah.
real you are, the stronger your brand, and the stronger the connections you make. Nothing beats that.
And I think so. We've talked about, Mihaela, about how social media can be a positive, can be a negative, can be rectified if we need to go back and do anything. We've certainly seen a rise in social media over recent years, and so we were keen to explore with you what differences you see in attitudes to personal brand with the different generations, because obviously we're in the workplace longer now, so we've got lots of generations working together in teams, probably with very different views on how important personal brand is, or indeed how personal the brand should be. What are you seeing there, possibly with sort of generations X, Y, and Z, in terms of their different attitudes to this and how they're living it?
Well, I think it's interesting because what I've observed is Generation X is still has quite a groomed presence, a social media presence. I still see this almost like a need to present this wise, this a very mature, person that has very strong but grounded, kind of opinions, and is very rarely puts himself, herself at any risk. They would rather not say something than to say something that is too controversial. And then we move on to the Y generation, that is a bit of a mix, where yes, we're still grounded, we're still this wise people who have life experience to share, but controversy is interesting. It's like every now and again it's good to poke the bear just a little bit and rattle the snake a bit. And then you have the Z generation that is almost all about controversy, trying to all the time poke the bear and see how others react, almost for the fun of it. If Although it's not for the fun of it, but it's how they see the world, and it's interesting, and it's really good to interact with them, because I've been looking online. I've had a lot of moments of thinking, oh, okay, what do I think about this? Or feeling a bit like, whoa, is that okay to say? And then I was thinking, wait, why wouldn't it be okay if that's your opinion and you say it in a decent way? Because regardless of the medium where you speak, there should never be insults, and there should never be language that is not appropriate. But challenging is okay, and what I experienced as an interesting thing was, during the pandemic, I was reposting or posting various things that weren't necessarily aligned with the general, mainstream media narrative. And I had a few people reach out to me personally to say, "Oh, are you sure, you want this out there and public? Because there are potential clients out there who might read this and will not want to work with you." Well, good. And they
Yeah.
shouldn't, because if that's who I am, that's what I think. And if you don't agree, there's no point in me posting something and then we meet and we start working together and I'll say what I actually think, and then you'll be like, oh wait, I don't agree with that, and a whole bang is gonna happen. I'd rather from the very beginning what I believe in, who I am, what I think. And if you're aligned, or if you're intrigued and want to know more, great, let's have a conversation. But if not, it's fine. I respect your opinion. You respect my opinion, but at least you know who I am. So I thought it was interesting, to that those, having and quite a few people reach out to say, oh, are you sure? Is that wise? So in a way, I admire the younger generations who are very brave to put out there, whether it's for because that's what they strongly believe in, or whether it's because they do want to create a bit of a hype, or they're still brave for doing it.
Yeah, I think we're certainly seeing that in our teams.
That's a really interesting point, Mihaela. And as you were talking there, I was thinking about authenticity, bravery, beliefs, and the name I was thinking was Novak Djokovic. Clearly a big personal brand because of being the number one tennis player, probably potentially one of the greatest of all time. And then through the pandemic, his personal views around what he wanted to do with his own body around vaccinations, and he was very clear around it. He wasn't telling other people what to do. He was just being very clear about his own beliefs and opinions. And you could argue that his personal brand started to get dented. People were rounding upon him. He was being criticised heavily, but he just maintained his calm, and he kept his kind of peace, and he kept with his own beliefs. And you roll the clock forward, rolling on for 2 or 3 years now, and because he was authentic to himself, that seems to have diminished now, and it all comes back onto an even keel. So I think, as you say, at times you have to be brave, and you have to be true to yourself. Otherwise, if he hadn't have been, that would have come out, and it probably would have affected his brand more in the long run by not being authentic, wouldn't it? So
absolutely,
yeah, really interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said earlier, authenticity is the key always.
So it seemed to me, Mihaela, as you were speaking, that it's not so much generational, it's more when you were saying, your views changed perhaps during the pandemic and you became braver about what you were willing to put out there. Certainly there was a shift in a lot of people's thinking in the pandemic, wasn't there? It's far more now we see in the workplace. People are sort of like, take me as I am. And they're far more honest about who they are. And almost like we have to fit more with how they're presenting themselves, perhaps, which isn't a bad thing at all. But it's a real shift in how it used to be, I think.
I think it's a mix, and I think what happened during the pandemic, it was very interesting to watch, because the biggest fear we live with, the fear of death, was actually woken up. It wasn't that dormant anymore. So it started to affect us in different ways, and it made us act in different ways, and so a lot of personal brands, if you want, shifted during that times, but they were extraordinary times. But and now, as we're going back to more of a normality, more of ordinary, if you want, times. Now it's interesting to see who goes, which of these personal brands go back to the way they were, or do they stick to the new sort of found voices during those extraordinary times. But there will always be times like this. There will always be moments like this in our lives. And it doesn't have to be something as big, as a world wide pandemic. If something happens in your personal life, it's I was talking the other day with a friend of mine about someone who was her boss, and I've interacted with him online, and I've noticed a change in his appearance. So I said, "Oh, interesting new look." And we and I said, "Well, what happened? When did you start growing this big beard?" And he said, "Well, about a year and a half ago." I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Oh, And I said, "What? You got a divorce?" And he was like, "How did you know?" I said, "Well, that's how I know, because when we go through something important in our lives, something that completely changes our status quo, we take action in changing something in our lives. women cut their hair, or dye it blonde, or men grow beards or shave beards, or it's various, they take on new sports, you become more obsessed with something in your life, and that changes, that alters your personal brand, without even realizing we're doing that. So we're communicating a lot more than we realize through our personal brand. And I think it's good to be aware of that as well, and understand that people around us observe something is going on.
I'm not saying anything, Mark.
I know what Becky wants to say, Mihaela, which is, I very often go through phases of having different length hair, different length beards, and so yeah, I must be having constant changes going on, Becky.
Well, it would be, as an exercise, Mark, would be interesting to go back to this moment when these changes happen, to understand what is going on with you, because there's definitely something going on that you need these changes, and it's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these changes. We evolve through experiences, and it doesn't have to be a bad experience. It can be a good experience that can lead to a certain change in appearance or in interest. But there is a change, and it's interesting to see what that is and how it shows on the outside.
Do you know what, Mihaela? I think I'm shallower than that. I think it's just an attention thing.
I think it's just that you can't be bothered.
I
can't be bothered.
I don't think so.
No, I'm going to come in here and say I think he has intermittent existential crises. So that's what that reflects.
Oh, go, Lizzie. Lizzie, say it like you mean it. Don't hold back.
I'm being psychoanalyzed by 3 people now. I'm getting slightly nervous.
Well, 3 women, I would say. 3 women, it's a lot more than 3 people here.
It's dangerous territory.
Anyway, I think we need to change direction now.
Definitely. We can have this conversation separately, Mark, if you want to. I'm very happy, to have a conversation and help you identify what Lizzie sees as an existential crisis, and Becky as what did you say it was?
He just can't be bothered.
Okay, that you can't be bothered. So I'm offering you my expertise.
There was a time, Mihaela, we're going off piece a little bit here, but there was a time when we did a recording several years ago and Mark had like a full beard and scruffy hair. It was when we were in the pandemic. And Lizzie literally said to him, "Go away, cut your hair off and come back again." And he did the same day. He was like, "I'm back." And we were like, "Now we'll do this recording."
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Anyway, let's get this back.
So a question that we really want to get out there, Mihaela, is if you're a leader of a team and you're developing your personal brand, how do you make sure you bring your team with you as well? Because they may look at you and go, it's all about them, it's in their brand. And how do you get the team to come on board and come along with you as part of that journey?
Well, that's a really good point. And as a part of our brand, or part of the brand of a company, is values. Are the core values. And yes, you have to embrace the core values of a company if you want to have a good time, working there, and if you want to feel you belong. But we also have our own values, core values, which define our personal brand. So as a leader of a team, you have to be mindful of the fact that the people in your team have their own core values, and having a conversation or multiple conversations and trying to understand and align these core values, mainly your teams and your own, and almost come up with, or ideally come up with the core values of that team, that's when that team will fully follow you. And when I say fully follow you, I mean, if you go and work somewhere else, some of the people in that team will probably, if they can, come and follow you to the new job, because it's the values, it's the core values that create this connection, a very strong connection, because where you immediately belong, without having to make any effort to fit in, because having to make the efforts to fit in and feeling you don't belong is very disengaging. People who are disengaged, it's almost impossible to motivate. But if they feel they belong, they're engaged, and they'll give everything. They will, this engagement will be the motivation, and you get out of those people everything, really everything. Without and working with those people feels fun, it feels natural, it has a flow, it's easy, it's growing, it's building on each other, to individually to grow collectively. So understanding values and understanding having these open conversations, especially in today's world where almost certainly your team has 2 or 3 members that come from a different culture, or for a different background. It's the key is to build, understand, and build on common values, and that's when your personal brand is strong and will withstand any turbulences, and you will grow through the times.
Mihaela, thank you. We could talk to you for hours, but we must move on to our final questions, which we gave you in advance, so you've had a chance to think about these. So the first of those is, what 3 publications, books, podcasts would you recommend to our listeners?
There are 3 books that I absolutely love and I go back to regularly. One is 5 People I Meet in Heaven, Mitch Albom, and is, I think, the best book to teach you to learn awareness. If you haven't read it, it's a very easy read, and it's brilliant. And if you do read it, please do let me know how you found it. Another one is Mike Singer, The Surrender Experiment. Very interesting book as well. Easy read. It does, I think, raise a lot of questions about, ego, and about our determination to make things happen a certain way, and how much easier it would be if we wouldn't do that. So definitely very interesting. And All About Love, Bell Hooks. Again, I found this book opening my mind in many ways around what is love. We all talk about love, but do we actually know what it means? Can we recognize it? Can you recognize when you are loved or when you love, and make the difference? And we almost always rush to say, yes, of course I do. Well, read this book, and you might take a few seconds before answering this question. So yes, these are my top 3.
Yeah, thank you.
I
think that's an interesting one. Yeah, if we could just spread a little bit more love around the world, maybe it'd be a better place. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in having a read of that one. Thank you. Yeah. So on to the final question, Mihaela. If you could go back in time and talk to an 18-year-old Mihaela, what 3 bits of advice, pearls of wisdom would you try and impart on yourself?
First one would be, there's a fine line between judgment and opinion. the more time we spend understanding and learning this, fine line, the better it is, because you can actually have an opinion without being judgmental. The other one is perception. Perception is reality. Therefore, if you understand there are different perceptions, you will understand there are different realities, and that changes the dynamic between the people you interact with. And the last one is, it's okay to change your mind. You are allowed to change your mind. If I would have known this in my, late teens, early 20s, my life probably would have been a lot lighter. I think it would have been less intense.
Yeah, I love that one. And the third one around, it's okay to change your mind. It almost links back to the second book you were talking around, doesn't it? Around the ego. How many times do we not change our mind because we're trying to defend the indefensible, because it's the stance we've taken, and we know it's not the right stance, but we just can't be honest with ourselves, can't we? So that's a great one.
Yeah, and we see it as a weakness. That's the thing, when in fact it's a strength.
Brilliant. Yeah, they were three great ones. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the show, Mihaela. Thank you so much for the time you spent with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's great. So if the listeners wanted to reach out to you, Mihaela, where's the best place for them to get to you?
Probably LinkedIn or my website, mihaelaberciu.com.
Perfect. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to those, so the listeners can reach out to you.
Thank you very much.
Explore much more of what we've talked about. Thank you. So, Becky, that was a great dive there into personal brand and corporate brand and things to think about. So, as always, we now need to try and find the three things that we took from what Mihaela was talking about. So, did you want to kick off with the first one?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Really, really interesting discussion there with Mihaela. The first one for me is about, there's a difference between judging and forming opinions, and that it's a very fine line, but that we need to understand that there is that line, so that we move from forming judgments, which she said is our natural default, through to actually having an opinion, but not judging others for having a different opinion. Something which my 17-year-old would benefit from learning, I have to say. But I think all of us would certainly... should bear that in mind, to judge less and just appreciate each other, have opinions.
And coming back to sort of NLP, there is no right or wrong. It's just opinions. So yeah, really, really strong point. I agree. So the point I took was when Mihaela was talking about the advice she gives to her daughters, and she was saying about when people say, I don't care what others think. And she said, well, you should care, but you just shouldn't become a people pleaser. And I thought that was a great bit of advice, because, you know me, Becky, I very often come out with, well, I don't really care what people think, but I do really. I don't know why I say it. It's just a throwaway comment. And I care enough to then think about what I'm going to do, but I don't do it just to please people. So that really resonated with me at a personal level as well. And I think, just think about, don't become a slave to other people, but equally, just I guess it comes back to that respectful point again, doesn't it?
Yeah, and she said use it as a positive filter, didn't she? Which, stop, think, and then act is such a, a valuable thing for all of us. And that almost leads on to her other point about how perception is reality, which means there are lots of different perceptions of lots of different realities. So just think about what you're putting out there, how you're presenting yourself. So yeah, a really great point as well. So that leads on really well to my third point, which is about what you can do in terms of social media if you've got some bits and bobs out there that perhaps you posted in your youth maybe, or when you were a bit more willing to throw things out into the world. And when Mihaela said you can delete it, so just sort of, it's almost like doing a cleanse, isn't it? A bit of a credit check on yourself. Go back and see what's out there, and just whether you're comfortable with it being there, or embrace it and acknowledge it and just go, wow, that was 3 years ago, not sure that's what I would be saying now, and make something of it, because holding yourself to account is such a great thing to see in people, and also being honest about who you are and how you've evolved and changed. So that was a really great point for me.
Yeah, and I think the point I took out of that as well was you can demonstrate how you've matured and grown as a person. So hadn't ever really thought about it from that point of view before. But it's a really good point. Is that you can document your journey almost through your social media history.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to delete your history, really, do you? Because it's made you who you are today. But we've all moved on.
Brilliant. Well, that brings us to the end of the show now. So great guest, great points. Really enjoyed that one. So thank you again to Mihaela for that. If you want to reach out to Mihaela or find links to the books that she recommended, then they'll all be in the show notes. So just take a look there and follow the links through. If you like today's show, then why not rate and review us? If you can give us 5 stars, then it really helps other people find the show. And a massive thank you to our sponsors, Larking Gowen. Without Larking Gowen, this show wouldn't be possible. So follow the link to their website to see how their team of experts can help you and your business. So that just leaves us to say, have a great week, everybody. Be kind to yourself and boost your health, wealth, and self.